I remember the darkness, the brownouts they were called, because we lived near the war plants in Des Moines, Iowa. My mother was afraid that we'd be fearful of the dark, so she put a night light deep into the doll buggy so that we'd have a glimmer of light in the midst of the brownouts. And to this day, I'm really not afraid of the dark. I'm one of the youngest children to remember World War II because I was 6 years old when it was over. There was VE Day and VJ Day, and then I remember that amazing day. There was joy in the streets. Now, we'd kind of heard about the atomic bomb and Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but the joy in the streets just overshadowed all of that. Everything changed from that day on. Before that time, there was food rationing and the war songs. I remember the war songs like "There'll be bluebirds over the white cliffs of Dover someday." Our generation is sometimes called the silent generation or the responsible generation because we grew up with duty. We're a small generation because we're not World War II or not baby boomers. We're kind of that bridge in between, linking both of them, and I feel parts of both of those generations. I remember, I was 6 years old, and I remember one day hearing on the radio something strange. There was news other than war news. I had grown up thinking, that's all there is, this reality of war in the world. But then I learned there were other things going on. I really had some joyful times in my early childhood. We lived in a bungalow right off Grand Avenue in Des Moines. I had an older sister, 2 years older, Marianne. And I remember one day I was playing outside by myself on the sidewalk, and I can remember walking up the street, just a few houses. Our mother was pretty much an overprotective mother, and she called to me. And I remember thinking, I'm not going to go into the street. I'm going to just play on the sidewalk. I'll be just fine. I felt I knew how to take care of myself and wouldn't endanger myself. I had some earlier memories even of that when I was in a playpen. One night, I think I didn't want to go to bed, and I remember my mother and dad just kind of saying, okay, we'll just leave her in the playpen. And I think, yes, pretty soon I said, I want to go to bed. There was illness, too. There was a time in which my mother and my sister and I were all quarantined for weeks because we had whooping cough. There was a tent over my crib with steam inside so that I could breathe. And I do still have claustrophobia. My sister went to grade school, Greenwood School, and I can remember my mother and I going up to meet her after school. I'd ride the tricycle up, and then Marianne would ride it back, and I'd ride behind on her, hanging onto her shoulders. And I remember thinking, someday I'll get to go to school. That was a fond vision that I had for my life. There was fun and fears and joys and tears in those years, and I won't go into all of that. But a few years later, we moved to the north end of Des Moines, 1111 Euclid Avenue, Highway 6, and that's when I started kindergarten. I remember the sunny bay windows of kindergarten room, and Miss Ash, and then in first grade, Mrs. Donald. And it was a fun time and a good place to be, and I always felt secure and safe and enjoyed learning, and I think that never changed. And I do remember one time, that may seem strange, but I was about 6 years old, and I remember thinking, when I grow up, I'm probably going to have to be a leader. I don't want to be a leader, but I think I'll probably have to be. I don't remember the context of that, but I surely remember that decision, and that reluctant decision in a way. During those years, we did go to Sunday school, first of all to Presbyterian Sunday school, and then later to, we were sent to the neighborhood Sunday school, which in Des Moines is Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Years earlier, when I was 9 months old, I was baptized. I remember hearing from my cousin Dean, my older cousin Dean, years later, what that was about. I was baptized in the home of my Aunt Carolyn and Uncle Ott. And Dean told me that they had brought a basin out from the kitchen, and the local Lutheran pastor had come over and baptized me in that small community of people. My mother had grown up Lutheran. It would be years after that that I would find out that I had been baptized on August 6th, which, as it turns out, was the day that my youngest son, Kirk, had been baptized, August 6th. To this day, Kirk and I call each other up on August 6th because that's the day that Hiroshima was bombed. And we remind each other of the power of Christ's death and resurrection, and in the midst of destruction, that God wants to bring about new life.